Derek Tyler Attico won the Strange New Worlds writing contest twice. Now he's got a new book releasing today, The Autobiography of Benjamin Sisko. Attico and I sat down to talk about writing about Sisko's life from birth to becoming a god. I'm T. Rick Jones, and this is your Daily Star Trek News.
It's great to see you.
It's great to meet you. I really, really enjoyed the book.
Oh, I'm really happy. I'm delighted.
I was drawn in from like the first sentence. It was
okay.
So great. You know, I'm a big DS9 fan, so you know, it was right up my alley.
Outstanding. I think you're the first person. Let me see if I get this right. Yes, you are the first person to have read it, and for me talking about, talking with who's read the book from cover to cover. So
that's
congratulations in the first. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I'm honored. How do you start writing a book like this? Because you've got Deep Space Nine, a series as a whole. So you know that whole 7 years history, and you know some of Ben Sisko's history from before.
Right.
What do you, I mean, do you go back and watch a bunch of episodes? How do you figure out what to put in and what not to put in? Take me through like the first thing you do when writing a book like this.
That's a good question, T-Rick. First thing I did was, I've never written an autobiography, okay? And this is my first novel. So there's some first for me. My first, I guess, idea was, I should watch this episode, that episode. And then as I started doing that, I realized that was almost like a fallacy. I would just go down a rabbit hole watching 7 years of Deep Space Nine, and it would almost be for my own edification and enjoyment, right? And that's not the assignment. That's not the project, right? So I stopped doing that, and I said, what I really need to do is think about the man, where he comes from, his family, because family is so important in Deep Space Nine. Family wasn't just a theme, I think, for Ben, but I think it was a theme throughout the show. Quark. I think the first family we see besides Ben and Jake, the second family we see is Quark and Nog, right? So we start to see this theme of family start to be threaded in a tapestry of Deep Space Nine. So I started to think about all that, and then so I started watching particular episodes towards that. But then I was like, wait a minute, he's in New Orleans. So I spent about 2 weeks just reading about the history of New Orleans, and I've never been, and so just absorbing the feel and the energy and attitude of New Orleans, and just trying to pick that up and make that. I wanted to make that a character in the book as well.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because that was actually going to be one of my questions, if you've ever been, because I too have never been to New Orleans, but the way you describe it in the book, and the food and the music and there's a funeral,
right,
it all feels the way I think New Orleans should feel.
Right. And I credit that to the books I read. I binge watched the show Treme on HBO, and I usually steer away from watching like fictional pieces. I watched a few documentaries, but Treme is such a good show that it really got that flavor and feel. And I just sat there, I remember, for like a week, and I just watched every episode. And I actually enjoyed it for what it was on its own. And I just sat there and watched it all. And between that and the reading, I really felt I had a really good grasp of not just the place, but the people, and what they're about. And so then that started to really inform my writing, and I started to really thread that into the book. Yeah.
Yeah, that family dynamic is so interesting, because Ben Sisko, beyond question, is the best father in all of Star Trek.
Yeah.
That relationship was written so real, and so you believed it. You
I
believed
believe, right,
that
right.
Ben and Jake were father and son, and it's throughout Star Trek. I mean, Worf's a terrible father.
Right.
You know,
He is.
uh, uh, William Riker's father is a terrible father. I mean, they're
He's a
all
terrible father. Right,
really,
right, right,
really bad fathers.
right, right. Kirk
Ben,
tries to be a father, but doesn't get an opportunity. His son gets killed. You know,
yeah,
it's just these themes
that,
of not good fathers or almost, you know. And you're absolutely right. Ben is a really good father. And that was another challenge because when we meet Ben Sisko in that first episode, Emissary, he's struggling, you know, because his wife has passed away and, you know, killed by the Borg. But after that, after he gets over that, we start to see someone that's really a complete human being. You know, he's got a lot of balance. He's got the life work balance pretty much figured out, you
yeah,
know. Even though first season, second season, he's not really too sure about if he wants to be, you know, on Bajor and the emissary and all that. He's still, you know, he's got it. Everything else, we feel, at least I think, that he's got it figured out. You know, he's really good with his people. He's a good leader. You know, he's good with his son. So I was like, well, where does that all come from? You
yeah,
know, that just doesn't just happen. You know, that has to come from someplace. So again, I had to strip that down and look at the characters around him, look at his father, look at Joseph, and really think about what I wanted to do for Ben's childhood, for Ben's upbringing, the people that influenced him, the people that, you know, in our formative years, they say between I think the ages of like 0 to like 6 or 8, we're pretty much formed in our impressions and ideas, right? So I had to think about that a lot. And so I started to create characters and family around Ben that would inform him so that when you go and look at the show, you could say, oh, I see elements of these people in this character now on the show.
yeah. And you did do a great job with that. I was not expecting as much about his childhood in the book when I started it. You know, I think I've only read one other of the autobiographies, and it was a long time ago. It was the one with Kirk, and
Right.
um, and that was great too. But I
Yeah.
don't remember there being as much about his childhood. But with Ben, he's such a complicated character. You kind of, I feel like you kind of needed to, right? You needed to
You
meet
need to. Yeah.
his father and his mother, who we never really met in the series.
Right.
His adoptive mother, who he doesn't find
Right.
out later that he's, you know, he's the son of one of the prophets. But you know, we have to meet the people that he grew up with to find out why he's such a great father to his son. And a lot of the decisions he makes from the point of when Jake is born, the
Right.
decisions he makes are all about his son.
All about his son.
Uh,
Right. Right.
And that's really well done, I thought, in the book.
Thank you. Yeah.
Without giving away too much, including, you know, taking the post at DS9 is really about Jake, you know,
Right.
and it I just thought it was really, that aspect was really cool, really
Thank you. Yeah.
well thought out, and obviously researched. And um
I don't know if I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know if I intended to do so much on his family when like before I was writing the outline um and that had to be approved by CBS. I don't think I was thinking about doing so much about the family, but then the more I started thinking about it, I was like, well, he has two mothers. He has his mother that is part, you know, Sarah, who is part wormhole alien, right? And
yeah,
then he has his mother that he thought was his biological mother that wasn't. And so then that's a story. And so then he has a sister, that's a story. Then he has two brothers that he mentions in canon, but we never really hear about. That's a story. So then the more I started thinking about it, I was like, there's just so much here that has to be developed and brought to light that I'm going to have to pay attention and spend time with the family. But in doing that, I think it may be a little bit different for readers because they're probably used to seeing these characters as like young adults or adults. But I started with that because when I get to him as a young adult, you see where it's all the trajectory of the character, you see where it's going. And you can look back in the first chapter and you can look back, you can see, yeah, I see where it's all going. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because I totally forgot that he had siblings.
Right.
As soon as it looked like he was going to have a sister, I was like, oh yeah, I kind of do remember a sister. I have no memory. I got to go back, and it made me want to go back and watch the series again anyway. But reading it, I was like, oh, I really want to experience that whole story. But I don't remember him ever mentioning those brothers, but I believed, well, as I was reading, it was like he must have mentioned them somewhere.
He only does it, I believe, once. I should know, right? Once in the episode, I think the episode is called Paradise, which is like first season or second season. And it's that episode that I think a lot of people know where he and O'Brien find these people that are on this planet and they think they've been marooned there. But it's this woman that has like purposefully, she wants to get away from society. So she's like trapped these people there and they all think they crash landed. So he mentions his brothers in that. So it becomes canon, because he mentions it, but that's it. And I think the writers kind of like got away from that afterwards,
Sure.
but I had to now take that and run with it, so.
Yeah. Did you use Memory Alpha or the Star Trek Encyclopedia or anything to refresh yourself?
Oh, yes, sir. Let's give a shout out to Memory Alpha because I lived with, if Memory Alpha was a pillow, then I would have slept with it. I mean, Memory Alpha was open, literally open on my screen every day. And of course, I would, after checking Memory Alpha, you want to actually check Canon and the encyclopedia. But Memory Alpha is just as a quick and fast resource,
Sure, yeah.
But God bless the people of Memory Alpha. God bless them.
Yeah.
And Memory Beta.
Yeah.
Which for the books, and
Yeah.
I would look at some stuff in Memory Beta and I was like, okay, let's see where I could put little Easter eggs and things that I could use, for Memory Beta as well. I think this book has a lot of Easter eggs, probably 50 to 100 Easter eggs in this book,
It
so
does. It has a lot.
You've read it.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
And I mean, and including character cameos,
Right.
Which I don't want to spoil too many. I mean, Uhura early in the book, Uhura is name checked.
Right.
That was kind of expected.
Okay, great.
Also, early in the book, there's a completely off the wall cameo that I don't want to spoil at all.
Okay.
How do you decide what cameos you're gonna put in? Does it just come organically as you're writing, or do you plan it out, or how's that all work?
Well, that's a great question. For that, I would like to thank everyone at Titan and CBS, specifically my editor and George Sanderson, also general manager. No one told me, pretty much after one conversation with George, no one really told me like what to do or what not to do. After I explained my vision for the book, and George liked that, and then I had to write the outline, and then the outline was approved by him, Titan, and then of course CBS. In the outline, I gave myself a lot of room because I didn't know what I wanted to put in or what didn't want to put in. So the outline was like guardrails, that tenets that I would hit. But once I was actually doing the writing, I was like, well, hey, this would be cool to do this or do that, and there was a few cameos I put in that that I was told, roll that back a little because that's just a little much. And I was like, okay, it's fine. But most of the cameos, I think 95% of the cameos I put in stayed in. And I just thought, what would be fun? What would I like to see?
Sure.
and what would be a challenge for me to write, and what would the fans like to see, hopefully, so.
Yeah. And there are a couple in there. Again, I don't want to spoil anything, but there are a couple in there where you're starting to set it up and you're reading and you're like, who's it going to be? It's going to be,
Right.
I know it's going to be somebody. Who's it going to be?
Right. Who's it
And
going to
then
be? Right.
there's a big dopamine injection when you're like, oh, it's that person.
Right. Right. And some of them I wrote with their characters we don't know,
Sure.
but they're just
Yeah.
original characters that I've just created or stuff, and I've just inserted because I wanted to keep people guessing, and
Yeah.
and fill out and give this, fullness, because other writers of Trek, Dayton Ward, David Mack, all these guys have done such a great job at filling up and expanding upon the world of and universe of Star Trek. So I wanted to give it a feel that, it's a huge universe, not just the cameos that we see,
So there's more to Ben Sisko than just being a father, though. He's the emissary. He's his family, I think, is a little religious. In the beginning of the book,
Right.
he's his dad's a chef. He's a husband twice. There are all these other things going on.
Yes.
And you hit them all. Like he's the most three-dimensional character in Star Trek, I think.
I think so.
Pretty close.
So, yeah. Pretty close, yeah.
He's the most real because of that, because there's so much in his background and who he is. He's a station commander, but he's also the emissary, but he's also he doesn't want to be the emissary, but then he accepts it, and all this stuff.
Right.
And we see him get promoted to captain, and it's all so
it's a lot.
Fleshed out character, right? And you manage to get it all in there. You get his friendship with Curzon in there. You get, and you only have 260 pages to do it.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
How did you decide what to focus on and how long to focus on things?
Honestly, a lot of it was just my gut. I've been writing for a while. I've been writing professionally since 2005. My first professional story was a short story, Star Trek Strange New World story, in a short story anthology. But a lot of it is my gut. For the outline, once I knew I got the project, I took about a couple days, and I didn't do anything. I just was standing in the shower for an hour or two, and and just think about what I wanted in the book, because I knew once I wrote the outline, and if it got approved, I would be locked in. So I couldn't come up with something different or radically different after the outline, was approved. So I just started to think about his life, and there were these people that were Ben has these tenets in his life and these points, because such a full life, you can't really hit everything. But I wanted to look at moments in his life and make it feel like we're hitting everything, make it feel like we're getting a really full appreciation and determination of who this individual is, even before he steps foot on Deep Space Nine, and to do that, I had to look at his friendships. I know just from my own life that the people that I've encountered in my life, positively or negatively, have had an influence on me. I know family has had a big influence on me, positively or negatively, So this was how I started to just shape and mold his origin story. And I think that's why we spend so much time with his family. But what's interesting and beautiful about the writing that I didn't even really realize until I was writing it is that those threads helped me as I got further down the line in the book, because then I could always go back to them and refer to them in certain places and certain things. And because we had started like, oh yeah, I see this or I see that, certain things about his mom, come back around. And you probably know what I'm talking about. Certain things come back around, and I think it's more powerful when they come back around,
Now, you had a unique challenge that nobody else writing these books has had, which is we know Ben's fate after the series. The series
Right.
ends with Ben becoming a prophet, basically, and going really becoming the emissary and going to live with the wormhole aliens for we don't know how long. Although
Right.
if you read the comics, he has come back.
He's out. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
ignoring that, we know how Ben what happens to Ben at the end of the series. Ben's gone at the end of the series. And yet
Right.
he's written a memoir. He's written an autobiography now.
Right.
So I don't know how much we want to spoil here, but how did you think about this? Your way of getting around that was, I thought, unique. And we learned about it in the prologue of the book. I mean,
Right.
it's not a secret for very long. But
Right. Right.
how did you reach that decision?
I had been thinking about that part of it before I even got the book, before I even got the project. I thought, well, how would I do if I was ever blessed to get the autobiography? How would I do it? And I would run different scenarios in my head. And what I came to long ago, a few years ago, was that everything has to come back to, and this is a basis in writing, um, that is a foundational rule in writing. It's character, right? So every major decision should come back or at least point towards who the individual is, right? So Ben is a father. He's a father, and so everything he does, or a lot of what he does, stems from him being a father, or his experiences as a father, as a husband, and so I was like, well, then there should be a way to start the book like that. And for him to and then at the same time, I should say, one of the things that bothered me about the last episode of Deep Space Nine, which is a beautiful episode and just written wonderfully, What You Leave Behind. But Ben never talks to Jake. He talks to Cassidy, but he never talks to Jake. And I understand the writers, and I understand, like, why they made those decisions. That's his wife. She's pregnant, but Sherrock Lofton just played that sadness so much on his face, not hearing from his father, not knowing. And that last shot we see, where it's Kira and Jake looking out, and the pullback is like it was so sad. I remember crying watching it. And so I thought that's where the book should start. Where it ends is where it should start, So without giving away too much, that's what I did. The last three characters you see in that episode, in the last episode, is you see Kira in her office. Nog comes in and gives her like new orders, and they talk about how he's been promoted.
Yeah.
And then Kira walks around Deep Space Nine and she sees Jake. So the last three people you see is Kira, Nog, and Jake. And in the book, the first three people are Kira, Nog, and Jake. And that's intentional. It's not, there's a lot of things that are intentional.
Uh-huh.
And because what I'm doing is I'm bridging all these years,
Yeah.
and I'm bridging it for the fans. I'm saying we're picking up from where we left off, and so the way, I won't say how, but the way that Ben reaches out, he reaches out to his son.
Your first published piece of fiction was a sequel to Far Beyond the Stars, which a lot of people think is the best episode of Deep Space Nine. It's certainly, up there.
Right. Actually, that wasn't my first. My first was in 2005, which was a Star Trek short story called Alpha and Omega, which was a sequel to Next Gen and Voyager's endings. It's out there, and it's called Alpha and Omega.
Yeah.
And it's it's my first story ever written, every professional story ever written,
Right.
and I was fortunate to get first place when I wrote that. So that was great. Now the one you're speaking about
Yeah.
was in 2016. Star Trek brought back the Strange New Worlds anthology for
Yeah.
the 50th anniversary
Huh?
of Star Trek, which was in 2016.
Yeah.
And when I heard they were bringing it back, I was fortunate because I hadn't had a lot of professional credits to my name, so I still was eligible, and so I wrote a Deep Space Nine,
Yeah.
uh, Benny Russell story.
Yeah.
I would say Benny Sisko, Benny Russell story. That's what he
I mean,
feels
it
like
might as well
sometimes,
be,
right?
right?
Right, might as well be. Called The Dreamer and the Dream.
Yeah.
Um, and that got in.
What does that episode, Far Beyond the Stars, mean to you?
It's an amazing uh piece of work. It's an amazing piece of Star Trek. Star Trek always pushes boundaries, and um, as a African American, as a Black man living in America, you know, Black people know that there's racism and prejudice and all that. But to see a beloved show that you sit and watch every week, recognize it, um, talk about it, and put it out there, and to do so, not to sensationalize it, but to do it to show, hey, this is where we have been, this is where we are, but look at where we can go. As a group of human beings, it's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing. The episode itself was phenomenal. Um, Directed by Mr. Avery Brooks. Um, it's just phenomenal. I've watched it so many times. I remember the first time I watched it though, I was just stunned watching it because it just was so poignant, so powerful, and it was done in such a beautiful way, which Star Trek does, where I don't think it was top heavy, where it wasn't forcing things down your throat. What it was really doing was it was showing the humanity of Benny Russell and the oppression he was dealing with. And I think that was something that everyone could just wrap their heads and hearts around. And I think that's the kind of writing that has always appealed to me personally. And I think why I gravitate and love Star Trek so much, because you want to give a message, but you want to entertain. You don't want to hit people over the head. Because once you start doing that, they will tune out, you know? And I think that's what's beautiful about that episode and Star Trek in general, is that it walks that fine line, that balance.
DS9 had some heavy themes. It had war. Nog lost his leg. It had
Right.
racism. It had themes about love. It had all these different themes. 30 years later, I would venture to say they are all relevant.
All of them.
So why is that? Why are these things? Why has the human race just not learned in the past 30 years, or what makes it so relevant today, as relevant as it was in the past and 30 years ago?
That's a great question. I think a few things. I think one, the writers of Star Trek have always been ahead and looking forward. At the same time that they look ahead, they are able to beautifully and wonderfully tap into humanity, um, and have things gotten better from 30 years ago? Some people would say maybe not. I would argue that things have gotten in some areas better, but humans are humans, and I think there's a line that Picard, I think, actually says, we're doing the best we can. We're trying, and I think, we all collectively want to move forward. We want to, we don't. I think if you ask most people, regardless of their affiliations or ethnicities and all that, people want to reach for those things that are talked about in Star Trek. Not everyone knows how to get there. and I think a lot of us are held down by our own personal things, what's happening. I'm trying to work and feed my family. I'm not trying to think about all these other things. And I think, but everyone wants to. And so I think Star Trek says, we can get there, but the only way we're going to really do it is together. It's just how it has to happen. We have to get there together. And so I think the writers realize that. I think their ability has been phenomenal. And anything I write and anything I do, I have to acknowledge it's on their shoulders, because this is not a character. I mean, there are characters I created in the book, but Ben Sisko is not a character I created. Ben Sisko, is a character created in the lexicon of Star Trek, and it's a beautifully created, beautifully written, and beautifully acted character. So I'm standing on this autobiography is on the shoulders of Ira Stephen Bear, Michael Piller, all those people that put all that together and had enough foresight and knowledge and forethought to put all that together and pass that baton to me and writers like me. And then we take that and try and respect and honor what was given before, but then move it forward. So I also thought a lot about Gene Roddenberry and his initial vision, and because Gene Roddenberry said really quickly, he said that we get our act together, but we get our act together after World War III, and so I thought a lot about that and what that meant, and try to bring all of that into this book.
Are you Benny Russell, or are you Jake Sisko, or are you both, or are you neither?
Oh man. Yes. Yeah.
All of that.
All of that. I think I'm all of that. I think I am the dreamer. I am the dream. I am graciously, I think I can say I'm all of that. And at the same time, none of that. So yes.
Derek Tyler Attico, thank you so much for joining me on Daily Star Trek News. The book is called The Autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, and it's coming out in late November. I should have written it down. Do you remember what the date is?
Yes, November 21st. It's just about 3 weeks away.
Yeah. So, click the show notes for a link to go buy it. You can buy it wherever books are sold.
Right.
We order it. It's a really wonderful read. Thank you very much for joining me and sharing this with me.
Thank you so much for having me. It means a lot, and I really enjoyed talking with you about this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. If you want to ensure we continue to make content like this, why not support us on Patreon? Your donation not only helps us afford the hosting fees for our website and podcast, but also helps us to pay our writers. Even a donation of as little as $1 a month helps to keep us running. Head over to www.patreon.com/Daily Star Trek News to help us out.